Oh yeah guys, welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about silence, not the kind that follows an awkward moment or the kind you get when no one has the answer to a question. I'm talking about black silence, deliberate, grounded, powerful, and lately it seems that this silence has some white folks confused. Some even admit they are jealous, and that begs the question, why? So guys, let's just get into these clips. I'm just going to roll the clips, then I'll be coming back with more commentaries. In case of any thoughts, kindly let me know in the comment section. Stay tuned.
Why do white people resent black excellence? Let's talk about it. Not all white people are racist, obviously, but there is a specific subset for whom black excellence seems like a personal affront to them, right? It really bothers them when black people succeed. The 13th Amendment emancipated enslaved black Americans in 1865, and then the Jim Crow laws kind of wrapped up with the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. So if we do the math, that's about 61 years in which black Americans were able to strive for success in any sort of meaningful way without like the constraints of the law pulling them down. 61 years. If we compare that to white Americans who besieged a land already owned and occupied by indigenous Americans, we'll put that around 1620 when, the Mayflower came here, then that gives them about 425 years to establish success in this country. 425 versus 61. If we compare those two fundamentally very different time spans, like how much did white Americans actually do in all of that time? If we are to compare even the poorest and most underprivileged of white America to black America generally, it is clear that white Americans are born way past the start line, right? By that I mean, by like nature of being white in American society, you do benefit from all sorts of privileges. And like, to be frank, you're not exhausted by the horrible experience of facing racism on a daily basis, right? You do have a ton of privileges. So I imagine existing in this bubble of privilege that you like totally deny the existence of black people for whom success is like second nature when it comes so easily and so readily, even though you've only had 61 years to achieve it. I imagine that's exhausting and frustrating. I imagine it makes people feel super, super inferior and hurts certain people's tiny, tiny little egos. And what do they blame that deep, deep psychic pain on? Well, of course, DEI and critical race theory and affirmative action. So I guess the question is, what might help those white Americans who just so strongly detest black excellence? Like, what will help you? And for that, I would suggest like a lot of therapy, like a ton of therapy. And I would also just suggest that we open the schools, right? We teach people history. Yeah, maybe? Okay, bye.
It might be weird, but I've been making an effort to try to see the world through the eyes of black Americans. And I wanted to share a couple of things that I've learned so far. I'm John. I make content that tries to model empathy and curiosity for our social differences. Number one on the list, black people don't hate me. I guess I didn't know necessarily how they would react, knowing all of our history, but yes, they see my white face. Yes, they know history, but one of my friends said one time, if you're cool with us, we're cool with you. And that made a lot of sense to me. Number two, many black people don't feel comfortable in white spaces. This is something I discovered by posting videos and all the comments. Many people said they may feel, or it may appear that they're comfortable, they may look relaxed, but there's just kind of a vibe that they don't belong there. Maybe it's unfortunately sometimes explicit, but vast majority is probably more like microaggressions that people don't even realize. But there's that. Number three, black history is American history. They corrected me on this early on, and it's because it's not that we don't want to have a designation for understanding the history and the experiences of black Americans, but it's more like when we call it black history, that implies that it doesn't belong to anyone else. Whereas if you really think about it, slavery, for example, that's more like white history than black history. Number four, I shouldn't focus on all the bad stuff so much. When I'm making videos, try to explore our worlds. I do have a tendency, maybe it's my own curiosity or maybe it's my biases, to focus on slavery and discrimination and segregation. And people have told me, hey, look, we do want people to understand those things better, but we also don't want to be defined by that. So I also need to focus on the amazing and greatness of black people and their contributions in our country. Number five, they know I have blind spots of my own and they're okay with that. It's more like, what's my attitude about it? Am I aware or trying to be aware? Do I have some humility about it? Am I open to learning? Or do I have a vibe like I don't even care if I have blind spots. I don't care how they come across to you. That's a big difference. And number 6, Black people don't want revenge. They want to live life abundantly. Yes, they want to live in a fair society. They don't want harms and injustice and flawed systems to be papered over or denied. They want accountability, but more than anything, they just want to live and be themselves and have fun and feel like they belong here. Not just on paper, but they feel it. Anyway, I'm learning a lot, and it's been a great journey, and I'm going to continue.
I wish it did.
In 1892, Ida B. Wells exposed how white men used a sickening fear of black men having children with white women as a twisted justification for the horrific lynchings of black people. Decades later, in 1916, Madison Grant's infamous book, The Passing of the Great Race, became a chilling blueprint for white supremacist ideology. Grant's twisted scientific racism proclaimed that Nordic whites were intellectually, culturally, and morally superior, portraying any intermixing with black people or other immigrants as an existential threat to the supposedly pure American stock. Grant's book fed into a misguided belief that democracy and racial homogeneity were at odds. Fast forward a century, and the alleged Buffalo Killer echoes this disdain for democracy, claiming it leads to the dreaded replacement. In fascist ideology, this fear of replacement fuels a toxic brew of nationalism and division. Domestic enemies are those who support democracy, immigration, and equality, and to these radicalized individuals, the mere existence of people who look, think, or behave differently is a threat to their imagined homogeneous nation. This irrational fear-mongering has tragic consequences. The alleged Buffalo Killer's manifesto espouses scientific racism, which is pseudoscience, mirroring Grant's twisted theories of Nordic superiority. For him, this hatred boils over into a senseless act of mass murder. White replacement theory, or WRT, is a deceptively fresh label for a dangerous ideology with deep roots in fascism. It's a propaganda machine that peddles the same poisonous lies of invasion, racial and political replacement, and fear of the other. This theory is not just harmless rhetoric, it's a dangerous justification for mass violence. By normalizing WRT, we risk destroying democracy and the ideals of human equality it embodies. It targets the very notion of shared humanity that forms the foundation of our society. WRT goes beyond mere bigotry, it's steeped in Eurocentrism. Despite the arbitrary nature of the European and non-European distinction, it elevates Europeans as superior, citing their inventions and innovations. But this misguided belief is rooted in a warped understanding of heritage shaped by the racist concept of whiteness in America. The proponents of WRT ignore vast swaths of human history to construct a false narrative of white superiority at the expense of their own actual heritage. They boast about music and technological advances, but even a cursory glance at the world reveals innovation across countless cultures. This elaborate deception serves a sinister purpose: to trick poor white people into blindly supporting a ruling elite. WRT is a system of oppression that uses value hierarchies, dualism, and the logic of domination to maintain control. It also aligns with the feminist critiques of white supremacy as it intersects with patriarchy. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, "It's not what you look like on the outside, it's what's on the inside that counts." It's a sentiment that echoes the timeless values of equality and tolerance. However, for some, the idea of inner worth isn't enough. Their concerns lie not in aesthetics, but in the foolish belief that their societal status, their culture, is somehow inherently linked to their genetics. They subscribe to this harmful ideology known as white supremacy, a worldview that persists in America despite its vile history. This belief is not an accident. It's a centuries-old construct designed to maintain a strict hierarchy: the ruling class, the warrior class, and the underclass. In this context of American chattel slavery, this hierarchy manifested as plantation owners, overseers, underemployed free whites, and enslaved black people. White supremacy seeks to perpetuate this stratification by keeping powerless white people in line. It exploits their fears and insecurities, convincing them that their well-being depends on the oppression of others. This distorted perspective has led to the mass incarceration of people of color and, in extreme cases, genocidal tendencies. WRT alleges that the white race is being replaced by immigrants and people of color. This fear-mongering tactic is a desperate attempt to galvanize support for the untouchable ruling class. It's all too evident in the contrasting ways that people of color and white people are treated by the justice system and the media. Scandals and crimes committed by white people are often swept under the rug or downplayed, while those involving people of color are met with swift and punitive consequences. The message is clear. White supremacy seeks to maintain an unchallenged power structure. It uses fear and division to control and oppress those it deems inferior. If you ever catch me bootlicking for the rich, hunt me down and slap the shit out of me.
Before we watch the remaining clips, guys, what are we even talking about? We are talking about a growing cultural conversation. Why are so many white people feeling enraged? Why are they feeling confused and even jealous in response to black silence? Is this silence a form of resistance, power, or something deeper? Here we are exploring the social, psychological, and historical dynamics that are unfolding in real time and how unspoken truths are sometimes louder than words. Join the discussion here, guys, as we are here to unpackage privilege, perception, and the unsettling emotions that emerge when power is challenged by stillness. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content that pushes the conversation forward. Subscribe, guys. Let's continue watching the remaining clips. I'll be coming back with more commentaries. Stay tuned.
I don't tell my boarding school orientation story very often because it's boring. There's so many other brown and black people who have the same story. It's not even a big deal. I mean, you could probably put yourself in this story and swap a couple details around, and you've literally had this conversation before. His dad walks up to me. He's like, "Hey, what sport did they recruit you for?" And he said it in a very smug and demeaning way. And I felt small for a second. And then I remembered that I was a classical musician and a really good ballet dancer at the time. And I was like, well, I don't play a sport. And so they couldn't have recruited me for one. But if they did, maybe it was that. Maybe it was the music. Maybe it's the ballet. What does your son do? What sport does he play? And then the guy was like, and then he grabbed his coffee and ran. In the grand scheme of racial American oppression, it's nothing. But if you're raising little brown or black kids, or you're somebody who doesn't want to raise rude children, keep listening. Usually, when we think about people who believe that black people are only good at rapping and running, we think, oh, they're so stupid. Stupid people, stupid ideas, racism, so stupid. But there's a really big problem with just dismissing that as stupid and useless and harmless. It's not. It keeps alive this idea from the Reconstruction period and this idea that President Andrew Johnson, way back in the day, would love for you to all keep helping keep up there. Now, everything great that I know at this current period of my life is from the amazing historian Carol Anderson. I would totally suggest you read her. She's accessible, it's clear, the bibliographies are insane. It's her book, White Rage, How Our Unspoken Racial Divide is Affecting Our Country to This Day, that helped me reframe the rapid and running question. She comes out of the gate running in the very first chapter called Reconstructing Reconstruction. How does she do that? Well, she reminds us of this. Back during the Civil War, back when the country was even founded, when slaves even first started arriving here in 1619, we weren't a country then, but you get the idea. There's this whole economic system that's based on labor that's cheap or labor that's free. It's easily exploitable. You own the people that are doing that labor, and you control all their movements. That's a really lucrative business. Then the Civil War happens, and you find yourself with this whole Reconstruction situation happening. And what does Reconstruction threaten to bring? Black economic independence. So all that excellence, all that Black excellence that was running those plantations, the different business strategies and planting strategies that these people had brought with them when they got dragged over here, or it had been passed down because their family had been dragged over here, all of that was this big possibility that those same people, now free, were going to be able to have their own economic independence, and it was going to undo the current structure. How do you combat this? It's something called Black codes, and they were all over the southern states. And these were codes of conduct and behavior and payment that really put Black people, newly freed, basically right back into slavery. There's this idea that, like, oh, after the Civil War and Martin Luther and Rosa Parks and like 3 days of civil rights work, everything became equal. And now if you're not doing well as a brown or black person, it's because of your own laziness and your own fault. And it's crazy to me that when you go back and you look at just even alone the history of Reconstruction, you can see this generational setup for failure and how this has never been a problem about black people's willingness to work or black people's ability to work hard. It's been about people trying to steal that labor and use it and take everything they could for themselves. So Anderson makes it clear that the South started to accomplish with votes and police officers what they couldn't do with bayonets, what they couldn't do with bullets, and what they couldn't do because they lost the war. For example, like with Mississippi leading the way in 1865, making up these codes of law that only applied to free black people and no one else. This whole first chapter, we learn of all the different ways that white supremacist states were basically reinstated right back in the South as if nothing had happened. And this is when you say, oh, well, Andrew Johnson and the Union, didn't they step in and do something? No, shocker, they did not. Even Union General Ulysses S. Grant, he didn't see anything wrong with black codes. Black codes started popping up in Florida, and they were horrible. They were brutal. They were violent. And all these Union guys were like, you know, they've got to keep these lazy blacks from just being vagrants. Were there Union people who were against it? Absolutely. Did that change anything? Not really. So Andrew Johnson's out here in his State of the Union speech, triumphant. He's like, look, we did what we meant to do. And we got our government, federal government, taking care of everything. Everything's going to be great. And then you got these southern states that are like, yeah, everything's going to be just fine. Because now that we have these black codes, we're going to make sure these lazy blacks are not going to be a burden on society. But what they didn't realize is between Andrew Johnson's policies and these southern black codes, they were ensuring black dependence because you didn't have right to land. You could be violently assaulted at any point. You didn't get good wages, and all of your movements were restricted. It's not that they didn't believe in black excellence. It's that they knew its power and they had to cut it down and stop it. And if I had a brown or black kid in the society right now, one of the things I would drill really hard into their head is this. It's not that these people let you that gives you this power to be who you are. It's because the law has now stopped them from stopping you. Just this little bit of background reminds us that racism isn't stupid. It's brilliant and it's very, very good business. And just on the rapping and running point for a second, there's nothing wrong with being a great rapper. There is nothing wrong with being intelligent and good at the sport you play. In fact, I almost wish that guy had asked me, what massive, beautiful rap album did you create to attract the attention of the Phillips Exeter admissions board? But that said, I want you to think for 2 minutes about the kind of people that are still benefiting from owning those teams and owning the music industry. And I want you to ask if it's as diverse as you think it is. Think about how people are always willing to let a small number of exceptional black people make the money. And think about why.
Okay, sorry I look like this. Actually in the middle of moving to Norway. But I have something to say to any white people watching. Of course you're uncomfortable. Guilt is one of the most uncomfortable feelings ever. Now, you don't have to feel guilty because you were never the one oppressing. You've been not racist, you've been equal, you've been open. But as a race, we are guilty. Not as individuals necessarily. But let's look at our discomfort and our guilt as taking off a band-aid or a plaster. If you're taking it off and halfway through it's too painful, you don't put it back on. You keep going. Wounds won't heal by neglecting them. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, you're feeling guilty, it will feel like that. Keep pushing. Imagine what people of color feel. Yeah, that's
Oh yeah guys, we have come to the conclusion of this video. Now here is where things get interesting. When black people go quiet, no explanations, no performances, no energy spent decoding racism for others, some white folks interpret it as anger. They interpret it as defiance or even judgment, but what they are really feeling is discomfort because silence removes the illusion of control. It removes access, and for the people used to privilege, that lack of access can feel like a threat. Yes, and right now we are seeing the jealousy confession. You might be surprised or not that some white individuals have admitted they are jealous of that silence, not because they want to be ignored, but because they recognize the power in choosing when to speak and when not to. Black silence often says, you don't get to conceal me today. You don't get my emotional labor. You don't get to center yourself in my experience. And in a culture based with being seen, heard, and validated, that kind of detachment is power, real power. Yeah, so think about it, guys. For generations, Black voices were silenced by force. Black voices were silent through laws, through violence and fear. So to choose silence today intentionally is not just a personal decision. It is a reclamation, but it also flips the script. Now it's white people who are demanding answers. White people are the ones who are demanding explanations, clarity, and not getting them. And suddenly they are feeling what Black people have felt for decades: unseen, unheard, and uncomfortable. So what is it now that, let me say, if you are white and you are feeling confused, you are feeling frustrated, or even jealous of Black silence, ask yourself, why does this bother me? Why do I feel entitled to someone else's voice, to someone else's time or even energy? What do I expect to get from their expression that I'm not finding in my own self-reflection? Black silence is not about exclusion. It's about boundaries. And maybe the real work isn't to determine more noise. It is not, the real work is not to demand more noise, more clarity, more access, but to sit with the discomfort and listen to the silence. Silence can be healing, it can be powerful, and sometimes it's the most honest response to a world that keeps asking for performance over truth. So instead of fearing the silence, respect it, learn from it, and maybe create space for your own. Yeah, guys. So that is it for today. Of course, all credit belongs to the original creators of this video. This video is meant for educational purposes and commentary purposes as well. Those who may want to be entertained, it can also be meant for entertainment purposes. Thanks for watching. If this made you think, share it. And if it made you uncomfortable, good. That is where growth begins. Thank you so much, guys. Subscribe for more honest and filtered commentaries. Don't forget to drop your thoughts below if you are ready to listen fast. Thank you and have a nice time. Peace be with you.